Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
637 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Chris Moody from Yahoo News in for Brian Wilson this morning.
I'm going to talk to the Speaker, and I'm going to talk to the Senate President. There was 90 days to work all of this out.
I was governor of Maryland last night about, or I guess it was today, 1 a.m. Midnight came and went at Annapolis. No budget deal. There's talk of a special session down the road. What happens now? Peter Franchot, the state comptroller, joins us. All right, Peter, explain this to me. It sounds like, from what the Post is reporting this morning, because they didn't pass a package of tax increases last night, and they didn't get the gambling thing through, the full casinos, if they don't come up with a special session and find out new ways for revenue, i.e. tax increases, then they're going to have to make about $500 million in cuts by July 1st. Is that accurate?
Well, those are in the legislation that was passed. Good morning, Brian. For your listeners who are concerned who live in Maryland, it is a debacle in Annapolis where essentially the Senate President, this obviously lies at his feet, demanded that there be a big expansion of gambling in exchange for passing the budget. Now, the budget is the only thing the Maryland legislature is responsible for under the Maryland Constitution. That's their job, to pass the budget. And they got to the 11th hour, and the Senate President said, you've got to expand gambling. And the House admirably stood up to him and said, no, we're not Las Vegas here in Maryland. And they refused to expand gambling, and he refused to pass the budget. And we have this mess on our hands.
All right, so if they're required by law to pass a budget and there's no budget in place now, then they're going to have to come back for a special session, right?
Well, they passed the budget, but the budget did not have any tax increases in it. And as a result, it has it's called the doomsday budget, which is a pretty common ploy down in Annapolis to stampede people into passing tax increases. Well, there's no tax increase, so they have a budget with these draconian cuts to education and other important services in it. People say, what should they do now? What they should do now is what the governor should have done late last year, which is take the budget, roll up your sleeves, work professionally and thoughtfully, produce a budget that does not have doomsday cuts or draconian cuts in education and other services, but does not have tax increases, and present that budget to the legislature for approval. What he did was present a budget that had all sorts of massive increases in taxes baked into the budget. So the legislature was faced with this false choice between, if they didn't pass the tax increases, then they would have to have these draconian cuts. This doesn't need to happen in Maryland. If we spend a little less time running around the country campaigning, a little more time rolling up one's sleeves and actually managing the state budget, we could get a thoughtfully balanced budget without tax increases.
Now, Mr. Franchot, Chris Moody here with Yahoo News. You had months, or the state of Maryland had months to put together this budget and to work out a deal. Why copy Washington, D.C., the National Congress, and wait until the last minute? You've seen how it can have disastrous results at the state capitol, or the nation's capital, rather. Why take so long? Why do this at the 11th hour, as you said?
Well, the reason is that the Senate President, frankly, we might as well have a Las Vegas casino owner as the Maryland state president, because that's all he cares about. He's a fanatic for expanding gambling, and he's the one at the end who said no gambling expansion, no budget. But even though it lies at his feet, this kind of mess that we have now in Annapolis, ultimately it's Governor O'Malley who's responsible for this situation, because months ago he didn't do the kind of work he should have done to present a budget that provided services, education, and health care, and all the things we care about, but did not have massive tax increases. And
so what happened?
So right now, as we stand, the draconian cuts of the doomsday budget will take effect if they don't have a special session. Hopefully in the next 30 days, the governor will roll up his sleeves and do what he should have done, which is manage the $34 billion state budget in a way that will give a budget to the state of Maryland that does not have draconian doomsday cuts in it, but simply has good efficiencies and good management, but not have these massive tax increases. Call a special session, get the new budget approved. The problem right now is that the doomsday cuts that were a ploy to stampede legislators into voting for tax increases they were never supposed to go into effect, Brian and Chris.
Right.
And now they are going to go into effect. And it's right. It's interesting that you brought up Washington, because we're absolutely a mirror of the dysfunction that is going on in Washington.
All right, but you've been around Maryland politics long enough to know that. I know the governor sounded like he was upset last night, but does this work to his advantage? Because he's going to say, look, if we don't get something done here, we're going to have to cut $512 million in funding to schools and other state programs. We have to get something done, and we're going to have to increase taxes, especially if we're not going to get a gambling bill through. So does this help him somehow down the road, that he's going to wind up being able to get more tax increases because his back is against the wall and everybody in the state's back is against the wall, in his view at least?
Yeah, I don't think it helps him at all. It certainly doesn't help the state of Maryland. We look like a mini Washington, D.C. But ultimately in Maryland, because the governor is all-powerful, everyone knows that this comes back and lies at his feet, because he's the one who's in charge of presenting the budget and making proposals as far as new revenues or reductions. And that job did not get done. It's lying in a smoldering pile of, I said debacle earlier.
Yeah.
This is a real debacle, and it lies obviously at the feet of the Senate president, but most importantly, it lies at the feet of Martin O'Malley. And so I just cannot imagine any scenario where this is good for him.
Now, Mr. Franchot, you've been very critical of the governor. Do you see a run for the governorship in your future?
I am very happy being the fiscal watchdog for the taxpayer, and really I'm just trying to give people a little bit of what they would apply here, common sense, which is we don't have to have this three-ring circus. We could, if we had a professional approach to the budget in Maryland and we actually put in the work necessary, we could provide everything that people in Maryland expect, and we could avoid this need for annual huge tax increases.
So are you closing the door on that option?
No, I'm just saying that I'm perfectly happy being comptroller, and I'm contributing something, which is what the people of Maryland sent me to do. And all that politics will there's plenty of time for that down the road. Right now, we have a real emergency in Annapolis with this collapse of the legislative session.
Do you think, last question, I only got about 10 seconds, do you think the governor will get some tax increases in order to avoid the doomsday scenario here?
Well, he certainly doesn't have to, because the doomsday budget was always a ploy, and he simply should go back to the drawing board and do what he should have done, which is present a thoughtful budget without tax increases.
All right. Peter Franchot, great to have you on as always. Thank you.